welcome to Power Lunch here on NDTV Profit. Over the next 1 hour, as you sit down for lunch, we're going to try and analyze for you all the cues that are coming in from not just the domestic markets and the political front, but also what's happening across Europe, and we'll analyze all of those triggers for you. First off, let's tell you what's lined up in the show today. Of course, the focus remains on Dalal Street, which is trading today lackluster on the back of subdued global cues. Most of the sectoral indices have slipped into the negative territory, the Sensex below 17,000. We'll try and break down the cues coming in from the markets. The rupee also in focus today. It has failed to maintain early gains and it has been trading in a range, now still trading below 57 to the dollar since late morning. Analysts are saying that any move on the upside should cap near 57.40. Meanwhile, global sentiment also remains cautious as investors are realizing increasingly that the summit of European Union leaders, which is due for Thursday and Friday, may actually achieve very little to solve the Eurozone's ongoing problems. What are the expectations? We'll try and collate that for you ahead on the show. And on the political front, at the center today, of course, is the last day as Finance Minister for Pranab Mukherjee. He's going to step down, but the big question is who's going to replace him? And insider buzz has indicated that perhaps the Prime Minister may keep the Finance Ministry with himself for some time. What's the latest? We'll get to you all that details. Meanwhile, the Cabinet is likely to take up the issue of debt restructuring of state electricity board soon. That's what we're learning, and we understand that it might be a mega debt recast. There might be a package to bail out state electricity boards. All those details my colleague Rajkumar Sahu will bring in later. And very interesting buy and sell calls coming in this afternoon from brokers. There's a buy call coming in on NCC, but an exit on IVRCL. Details of those investment calls also coming up ahead. And the RBI's decision yesterday to increase ECB limit for refinancing rupee loans of infra companies. Is that too little too late to help the infrastructure sector? Well, what do the infra finance companies think about these measures? We're going to set that discussion going a little later on the show. We have Hemant Kanoria and Mr. S.K. Goel joining in shortly. First off then, we check in on the markets and see what's happening with Dalal Street. The Sensex and the Nifty, both of them have been trading absolutely lackluster right since the start. And right now you have 51.23 on the Nifty and the Sensex is still trading below 17,000. Right now at 16,907. That's just 25 points in the positive territory, 0.15% gained for the Sensex. The broader markets, we'll pull that up for you as well, and we'll see the broader markets are in fact trading slightly better than the broader indices. So you have the CNX Mid-Cap Index right now up about 0.4%. The BSE Mid-Cap Index is up 0.3%, and the BSE Small Cap Index has gains as well. So traders are giving some focus to mid and small cap stocks today. The advanced decline picture will come up on your screen. It will give you a better sense of what's happening in this market. Advancing stocks have been outnumbering the decliners, but not by a wide margin. Just about 277 stocks advancing right now at lunch. And you have 208 stocks declining right now. A quick check also of the sectoral indices, and banks today are doing fairly okay with about 0.4% gained on the bank Nifty. But FMCG and IT counters are taking a bit of a knock with both those two indices trading in the negative territory. 0.7% shaved off the FMCG index. Bankex Healthcare Realty indices, they are clocking in gains of about 0.5% each there. But let's play out for you some important comments coming in from two wise men on Dalal Street who are going to be talking about their vision of this market in the short to medium term. Nilesh Shah of Envision Capital talking about his hot stock picks.
We've clearly seen this market in a pretty large trading range of between 4,800 to 5,200, and clearly on the way up we're seeing that the high beta is beginning to outperform, and that's because the market is perhaps beginning to see a lot of value in them, given that there's a fair bit of pessimism in terms of progress on the investment cycle front, on spending on capital goods, and also given that there are serious headwinds in terms of the monetary policy and relatively high interest rates. So in that kind of an environment, this is a segment which has been avoided or eschewed by investors, and clearly think that most investors are underweight on this segment. So clearly when we see a liquidity driven rally, or when there is relative beta play, clearly rate sensitives, particularly infrastructure, capital goods and PSU banking stocks have a significantly higher potential of outperforming compared to rest of the market.
From the market to equities now, and the rupee is back below 57 once again. It's failed to maintain the initial gains that it started off with, and it's right now trading at 57.05 to the US dollar. That on fresh demand for the dollar coming in from banks and importers. Now, of course, the rupee opened slightly stronger. It opened at 56.90 to the dollar as against yesterday's closing level of 57.01. But the dollar today has also gained strength against other currencies and as well in the overseas forex markets. A quick check of the bond picture as well. The yield on the 10-year benchmark bond, that's up slightly. It is right now at 8.09, and the traders, they are also essentially on hold to see whether or not the central bank announces any new open market operations. Let's move on then and talk about the rupee a little more in detail. Is there going to be more downside in the rupee? In such a case, will there be more support coming in from the central bank immediately? Ritu can answer all of those questions for us. She's joining in right now. Ritu, at least in the short term, the RBI measures, they've not done much. They failed to do much. But there has been a growing body of experts who are saying that the rupee is fairly valued. So talk to us a little bit in detail about the rupee trajectory that's likely now and what the RBI's thinking might be.
Well, that's a good question as to what the fair value of the rupee is. As of now, people, for a very long time, people were talking about 52 to 54 would be the fair value for the rupee on a real exchange rate basis, adjusted for inflation essentially. But now people have started saying that, possibly one cannot rule out 57, 58 levels as of now, which seems to be more of a fair value than anything else. Beyond these levels, clearly rupee will start to look very, very undervalued, but then that will not be enough to support the downside momentum for the currency is what we are seeing, because it is now largely after the RBI measures. Now it is the EU summit, the Eurozone worries, Spain worries, Germany worries also, which are essentially what is going to weigh on the currency market sentiments from here on in the near term. And if they weaken further, one might as well sort of expect and want the RBI and the government together to come and act on the kind of contingency plans that they had talked about when we were talking about a Greek exit. So possibly that is what is required as of now to boost market sentiments on the currency front. But as of now, there is no relief whatsoever. Expect some more downside to continue.
Indeed, it will. Ritu, thanks very much for the details. And we were also talking to experts all through the morning, and some of them were also trying to indicate that perhaps with the departure of Pranab Mukherjee now from the finance ministry, there might just be a shift in the sentiment. So, of course, today is Pranab Mukherjee's last day as the finance minister of India. He resigns later today after meeting the Prime Minister, and then there's also going to be a press conference addressing the media at around 4 this evening. The Congress has already bid him a warm farewell, and Mukherjee seems all set to move to Rashtrapati Bhavan with a majority of votes in the Electoral College favouring his candidature for the post of president. The election, remember, is on July 19th. But besides needing a new finance minister, of course, the Congress will have to think of someone to replace him as the leader of the House, because remember, Mukherjee has been the party's chief troubleshooter. He's so far tackled the difficult allies and the aggressive opposition parties as well. Who's going to take on that most difficult job, that of the finance minister? Sources seem to indicate that perhaps the Prime Minister could himself keep the finance portfolio for now. Sapna Das tracks the finance ministry very closely, and she can give us a better sense of what's happening there. Sapna, thanks for joining in. It's not going to be a surprise if the PM handles the finance ministry for now, right?
That's right. What it looks like as of now is the Prime Minister, who is also a well-known economist, is probably going to keep the charge of finance ministry additionally with him for some time at least. The other combination that's working out is the fact that probably Dr. Rangarajan would have been given the charge, but we really don't know whether a technocrat can take full charge of a ministry like finance. The third angle that was being worked out, rather, this is a bit strange, but in the last couple of days, what we get to hear is that there's a high bet on P. Chidambaram coming back as minister in the finance ministry, and the buzz is that he might be given an additional charge. Now that sounds a bit far-fetched, because his ministry at his home is also an equally important and sensitive ministry, but as of now, the highest probability is that Prime Minister would like to actually keep finance as an additional portfolio with him, and in fact this announcement could come very soon after the finance minister resigns.
Sapna, let's also just try and analyze how Pranab Mukherjee fared as the finance minister in the last 4 years. We've prepared a chart, and we'll pull that graphic up on the screen for you. Of course, it these numbers that we've put together, it might seem a little simplistic given the many different pushes and pulls in the economy, but then the numbers speak the truth, right? When we pull that graphic up, do also take us through the last 4 years of Pranab Mukherjee. It's been a tough 4 years, but how has he fared vis-a-vis his predecessors?
Well, he took charge at the time when the Lehman crisis technically was petering out, but the economy was still, in the throes of, of a kind of a stranglehold. So he came at the time when the last fiscal stimulus package was announced. That was somewhere around just after it was announced, May, June 09. So actually, he has had 3 years here at the Finance Ministry, and they have been a roller coaster. It has been a roller coaster ride, because the same year we also had a drought. And there was further stimulus measures that the government had to think about. There were debt waiver packages which all state governments had been demanding, and but after that 10, 11, 11, 12, 10 or rather 9, 10, the economic growth rate was not as low as expected. 10, 11 was quite decent. 11, 12 was a bit of a bumpy ride, a bit of a shock, and now we are in 12, 13. 12, 13 is the most critical year, and if you look back during the last 3 years, to be fair, he has tried his level best to build consensus on important legislations like the goods and service tax. But there also, I mean, not much of a very concrete headway has been made. Second, if you look at the direct tax code bill, it has been brought in a very watered down way against what had been proposed earlier by the earlier Finance Minister, Mr. P. Chidambaram. So that's another thing that's a pointer. He also tried to introduce the FDI in multi-brand retail. His ministry has also tried to spearhead that. Well, that also could not take off, probably because the timing was wrong. They tried to do it just before the winter session started, and then there was a lot of logjam on that in the parliament. So if you look at it in a big picture format, you don't have much to go about, but the fact remains that he had great political skills, great parliamentarian skills in the parliament, and he was a very good speaker, right, leader of the house. So those are the things we really don't know how that is going to be filled up, that vacuum.
And indeed, all of those skills will be missed when Pranab Mukherjee steps down as Finance Minister. There's going to be a news press conference at 4 p.m. So we'll get all our viewers tuned into that one as well. But right now, we're taking a short break here on Power Lunch. On the other side, we're going to get to you some of the top corporate stories of the day, including a look at state electricity boards. From what we understand, the cabinet is likely to take up the issue of debt restructuring of SEBs, and there might even be a big bailout package. More details coming up. Don't go away. Thanks for staying on here on NDTV Profit. You're watching Power Lunch. The last time we checked in on the markets, they were absolutely flat. They've recovered a little bit, so you have about 0.2% gained on both the benchmark indices. Right now, the Nifty at 5126, that's up 11 points. But yes, there has been a recovery, and that you can also see from the intraday chart. It's been very volatile, of course. The Sensex picture is also similar. 16,919 is where the Sensex is trading at. So you've got a 0.2% gained on that index as well. Mid and small cap stocks are seeing a lot more interest today from the traders. So you have both those two indices, at least the BSE mid cap index, CNX mid cap index, and also the BSE small cap index. Both of them have got about 0.5% uptick on those two indices. Meanwhile, the rupee not going anywhere, still below 57 to the dollar. Right now, the rupee picture, we'll pull the rupee intraday chart for you. 57.06 is where the rupee is trading at right now. And that's one of the reasons you're seeing that the IT space today is looking a tad bit weak. For a second day running, you have the CNX IT index trading in the negative territory. The CNX IT index right now off 0.2%. The MNC space and also the FMCG space, those are the two laggards in today's market. At the index level, FMCG of 0.5%. And just a quick check of stocks that are gaining at lunch and losing at lunch. So we'll pull up the stocks from the Nifty basket for you as well. The gainers, losers coming up on your screen shortly. ONGC, okay, the losers first. HCL Technologies, top loser there. Also, Infosys is losing rather sharply today, down about 2%. HCL Tech off 2.11%. SAIL is off about 2%. Asian Paints, Tata Steel, BHEL, some of the standalone and heavyweight losers in today's market. But when you look at the gainers, and there will be a handful of gainers as well, ONGC, GAIL, Grasim, Tata Power, some of those gainers in today's market. But this is a stock-specific market, of course, and lots of stock-specific action coming up. Right now, joining in our entire research and reporting team with a whole host of issues. Joining in, Raj, on a new story that is picking up about the debt recast of state electricity boards. Shefali is joining in to talk to us about Essar Oil and why that stock is today down more than 3%. Pankaj and Mithali will be joining in shortly to take us through some interesting investment calls that are coming in on NCC, IVRCL and also on Kane. And Ritu is going to also joining in to talk to us about the debt restructuring of HCC. All of that coming up later. But first, we're going to go to Raj. Raj, we do understand that the cabinet is perhaps likely to take up the issue of debt restructuring of state electricity board soon, perhaps even later this week. And there might even be a bailout package, is what we understand.
That is right, Bianca. In fact, the total debt of the entire distribution companies, the state utilities we are talking about, is about 1,50,000 crore, and that is where the power companies are actually getting hit, because once the distribution company, that is DISCOMs, are not paying to the power companies are also suffering, and that's why the central government has decided to take this step. And there was a committee that was appointed, that is called B.K. Chaturvedi committee, and he's a member in the planning commission, and he has suggested few steps. So it's a multi-pronged strategy we are talking about. First is, of course, the 50% of debt we are talking about will probably, for that value, the state electricity board can actually issue bonds, and that will be supported by the central government. That is one. So that will take care of the 50% of the debt we are talking about 75,000 crore. The 75, for rest of the 75,000 crore, there will be debt restructuring by the public sector banks and all the other banks, and for that instruction probably will go from the central government, and the debt, the restructuring will basically delayed payment of interest, and the interest rate and also the tenure would be kind of extended in this restructuring plan. So that will take care of the 1,50,000 crore rupees of debt of state electricity board. So all in all, it's going to good news, and probably as early as this week, probably we can see the cabinet taking up this issue.
Right, Raj, thanks very much for the heads up. The cabinet meets later this week, and this is one of the issues that they will discuss. Moving on then, let's talk about HCC. That's a stock which is off slightly today, but HCC's got a huge stockpile, more than 8,000 crore rupees. It's been trying really hard to restructure its loans. No headway so far, but now we understand that in fact the lenders to HCC, they have agreed to some form of a debt restructuring package, and I'm going to go across to Ritu now, who has all the details from her sources. Ritu, I understand that the lenders met yesterday. What have they decided on?
Well, clearly, this is a major headway, Bianca, for Hindustan Construction Company. The lenders did meet yesterday to discuss the CDR package, and they have agreed to restructure the total loans of Hindustan Construction Company. This should come as a major relief for the company going forward. Remember, the controversial Lavasa is also indirectly part of this entire restructuring package as such. Now, there were two main issues which the lenders failed to agree upon earlier, which they have come to a conclusion yesterday. One is promoters' guarantee. The promoters earlier were not willing to give guarantee, but this time Mr. Gulab Chand has agreed to give his personal guarantee as part of the restructuring package. And the second one was with regards to the working capital, whether the working capital limits would be enough for the company, the servicing capability would be enough or not, because it has a lot of commercial papers outstanding which it had not been able to pay to the banks. Those have also been agreed upon by the lenders. So lenders will now provide around 1,500 crore worth of working capital limits. The promoters, apart from giving their personal guarantee, have also agreed to infuse over 200 crore rupees by way of equity, which will come from selling of land, selling of other stakes in associate companies from HCC and its group companies. There's been a pledge of one of the holding companies shareholding also. So all of these form part of the security against which this massive debt restructuring package has been agreed upon by the 27 lenders who actually who actually have given loans worth over 8,000 crore rupees to this infrastructure company. This is one of the big restructuring agreements which is under the CDR, which has been agreed upon yesterday for this financial year FY13. ICICI Bank, remember, it has one of the largest exposures to HCC, the package being led by that one.
Ritu, thanks for the details there. Good luck to HCC on its debt restructuring plan. But let's move on and take up some interesting calls, investment calls that are coming in. And I'm going to get in Pankaj and Mithali both on that front right now. There's an interesting call coming in from Citi which says sell IVRCL and buy Nagarjuna Construction. Pankaj joins in with more clarity on Citi's unusual call there. Pankaj, why does Citi feel that NCC has got a better chart and it's got more upside ahead on the stock?
Well, Priyanka, it's one of the most interesting strategies that probably you can come across in the mid-cap construction space. Their strategy is to sell IVRCL Infra and buy Nagarjuna Construction Company. They have downgraded IVRCL to a sell and made NCC as a buy. The stock NCC is up about 1.5% as we are speaking. It's a buy rating for NCC with a target price of 53 rupees a share. They believe that around this 39-40 rupees where the stock is, it largely builds in a lot of negative news, and the recent orders that company has got seems to be very, very attractive, and this going ahead will lead to a multiple re-rating, and that's why they have upticked their target price by giving a slight bit of higher multiple because of the quality of the orders that the company has. Also, apart from that, if you look at IVRCL, they are saying that IVRCL continues to face headwinds, and that's why sell. So the interesting part about the strategy is that you have a double call coming in on the sector: sell IVRCL and buy NCC. NCC is up about 1.5% as we are speaking because Citi probably likes it from the current levels.
Okay, Pankaj, thanks very much. And there's another interesting reco coming in on Kane India. Credit Suisse recommends traders to go long on Kane, and it feels that if the rupee weakens and oil bottoms out, then there might be a smart play in Kane possible. Mithali, do explain.
Well, Bianca, very interesting call by Credit Suisse on Kane India. For now, they have a neutral rating, but what Credit Suisse is of the view that if you are bearish on the rupee and believe that the oil has bottomed out, Kane India could be a long play for going ahead as per Credit Suisse. They also believe that the Kane India valuations are suggesting that crude has pretty much bottomed out, and they believe that the stock can outperform crude. For this, they have kind of correlated how global stocks have outperformed Brent over the last few weeks, because if you understand, Brent has been down almost 25% in dollar terms in between May and June, and almost 18% in rupee terms. So, and whereas the global stocks, they have pretty much outperformed Brent, and even Kane, if you see, has pretty much remained steady vis-a-vis Brent. Also, they believe that Kane valuations imply crude at around $85 to $87 per barrel if rupee is at 57 levels. This implies that it's at a discount. The discounts have significantly reduced from the current spot prices of crude. Also, any kind of valuation upside for Kane would come in from higher production, and also from where rupee goes on from here, because we understand that rupee will lead to any kind of weakening in the rupee leads to further kind of cash flows coming in for Kane India.
Thanks very much for running us through what call has come in on Kane India. Today the stock's at 329, trading absolutely flat right now. But one stock which is not, which is on the other side losing RN heavily is Essar Oil. The stock is down more than 3%. The Gujarat High Court has directed the state government to fasten the recovery of this company's sales tax deferral liability. And remember, this we're talking about a 8,000 crore rupee liability, and when you add interest, etc., of course, all of that. Shefali, do give us the backgrounder on this case, and of course also do tell us how big an impact is this going to be on Essar Oil?
Well, Priyanka, I'll answer the first question first about the background of the case. It's about the sales tax deferment because earlier under a incentive scheme, a capital investment scheme of, by the Gujarat government, Essar Oil claimed certain incentives with regards to the sales tax deferment, but then they were eligible to claim this benefit only when they only if they could start the refinery project on time, but they were not able to do so because of certain reasons, and hence later on the court ruled out that yes, they are not eligible for this particular incentive. But then Essar Oil later on sought relief as far as this repayment is concerned, and they were seeking that this repayment that they should be able to make in installments. So now the court has said that no, they can't even make it in installments, and they have to make it all together in lump sum amounts. So that is why we are seeing the stock price react like this. It's down 2.5–3% today. And also now Essar Oil is saying that they are planning, as of now they've not received the order copy, but once they receive, they'll take the next course of action, and they're also planning to approach Supreme Court seeking relief as far as the repayment is concerned. And also reports suggest that they're also planning to raise about $1 billion to meet this repayment, if at all they have to make it upfront. So that we'll be keeping an eye on what happens on this particular case, but as of now the stock is taking a beating.
Indeed it is. It has been right since the morning. Shefali, thanks very much for the details. We're right now taking a short break on Power Lunch. Don't go away, because on the other side we'll analyze all the global signals that are coming in, including a look at why there's such a risk-off sentiment, because investors are increasingly believing that this EU Leaders Summit, which is slated for Thursday and Friday, it may actually achieve very little, if at all, in solving the Eurozone's ongoing problems. More details are coming up. Thanks for staying on here on NDTV Profit. Markets often take note of negative cues coming in from across the world, and it has. In fact, most of Asia today started off and ended in the negative territory. Nikkei's off 0.8% at close. The Kospi's also got about 0.5% cut to itself. The Chinese markets didn't do well either, but they've got a flattish sort of close coming in. And Europe, which opened up for trade about 12:30 India time, it's got a slight positive uptick, but really nothing really very strong in terms of the positive momentum. You have the CAC 40, the French index, up just a little under 0.5% right now. The FTSE 100 is off 0.3%. The Spanish market, though, is up more than 1% right now. Portuguese market is trading in the red. So net negative. Mild cues, really nothing out there, but there are lots of triggers to take note of. When you take a note of all the news flow that's coming in, let's just collate them for you. First off, we want to talk about Cyprus, because now Cyprus has become the 5th country in the Eurozone to go in and ask for a financial lifeline from the Euro's firewall funds. It's of course the government of Cyprus has said that the purpose of the required assistance is to contain the risks to the economy that is due to the large exposure to the Greek economy. Cyprus, which takes over the European Union's rotating presidency on the 1st of July, it follows Greece, Portugal, Ireland, Spain in seeking help to return to financial health. Then, of course, the other big headline has been Moody's downgrading 28 of Spain's largest banks. Moody's has said that the banks have several links to the sovereign, and thereby Spain's reduced creditworthiness implies a weaker credit profile for Spanish banks as well. These banks have exposure to commercial and real estate also, and that's another factor that Moody's has factored in while handing out these cuts. Amongst those downgraded are Banco Santander, BBVA. These are some of Spain's biggest banks. At least a dozen other lenders have also been lowered to junk status. And of course, in Greece, the new finance minister has resigned, and that because of ill health, yes, but that's really now thrown the government's drive to soften the terms of an international bailout into confusion days before a European summit starts off. Vasilis Rapanos, who's been rushed to the hospital on Friday last, before even he could be sworn in, he seems to have had a history of ill health, but the Prime Minister, Greek Prime Minister Antonis Samaras, he's gone in and accepted the Finance Minister's resignation. Essentially, it's now a worryingly chaotic start to the new government, which faces a rocky road and responding to huge domestic opposition to a harsh international bailout in the face of steadfast European opposition to any watering down of those bailout terms. But of course, with the EU summit now starting off, it's just another 2 days to go. It spreads out over Thursday and Friday. There is increased talk in global markets that we've been here several times before. Of course, there are optimists also who are still billing this EU summit as the last chance to save the euro. But with Angela Merkel also doing some straight talking now, let's take a look at what is at stake. Devina is joining in right now with more on this. Devina, good afternoon. Is there an overwhelming sense that perhaps the summit of European Union leaders this week, it may achieve very little?
Well, that could be a possibility. In fact, words coming out that you should probably not keep expectations too high. Particularly, you've got Angela Merkel putting water on hopes that you could probably see she's opposing. She's stuck to her opposition, to not have a pool of the Eurozone debt as well. They are going to meet in a 2-day meet. Friday is going to be important from the point of view as to what comes out of Brussels. Remember, this is the 20th time you're seeing the EU leaders meet since the time the crisis in the Eurozone area started off in 2010, and now particularly more important as you've got the 5th country, that is Cyprus, that's asking for a bailout and a lifeline for its bank just after Spain has filed an official request for a bailout of its banks. Now, investor sentiment is very edgy, though not one-sidedly pessimistic, but still caution ahead of what comes out in the EU summit. Obviously, what the markets and investors are going to be watching out for is the direction that you get from the outcome of the EU summit. Whether or not your forward-looking agreements will, there'll be some bit of consensus there or no, will be waited and watched out for. But clearly, it looks like Angela Merkel is staying ground and staging ground on the opposition that there should be a pool of the Eurozone debt.
Tough talking by Angela Merkel there. Devina, thanks very much. At this point, I'm also going to get in an expert voice all the way from London. Mark Priest, senior trader, is joining in right now on the phone line from London. Mark, good afternoon here from India. This is Bianca. How, Samaras's government, it's an unlikely alliance of the right and the left, but how difficult does his job now become with a key person, the finance minister, resigning? Do you think a softening of the bailout conditions becomes a bit more arduous?
Well, it's not the greatest start to a coalition, to be honest with you. He himself was in hospital this weekend. It is going to be a long road for them. They've got a lot of issues to resolve, and it's not a great start that their first choice finance minister has resigned. So I think that adds to the uncertainty. And actually, today we've seen a bit of a sell-off in the Greek banks. And they're all down sort of between 3 and 4%, and I'm sure that's on the back of what we've seen there.
Sure. Okay. Mark, let's come to Cyprus. The request for bailout for Cypriot banks, is it likely that they will face fewer conditions than a full-fledged economic rescue package?
Again, we haven't really heard of any restrictions laid on them. I mean, I think the issue that Cyprus were going to need help has been around in the market as a rumor for a while. There was a story that they were going to possibly seek help from Russia. So that story sort of just beginning to unfold. In the same way that the Spain has formally requested, we haven't actually seen whether they've had any restrictions laid on them as well. So I think it's a bit of a wait-and-see game to see what happens with Cyprus as well.
Mark, thanks very much for the perspective there. Thanks indeed for joining in. Meanwhile, nothing much is happening with the European markets. Last time we checked in on them, flattish to slightly positive, and that's where they are right now. We're taking a short break here on Power Lunch. On the other side, we've got a special discussion coming up. Do stay on with NDTV. Welcome back to Power Lunch. As you sit down for lunch, we've got some special guests joining in as well to help us through a lot that's been happening. Among one of the things that the RBI did yesterday, of course, we'll just flag off some of those for you. One of the things it did in its effort to shore up the economy and more so to support the flagging rupee includes a relaxation of the external commercial borrowing norms. Manufacturing and infra companies which have foreign exchange earnings, they can raise ECBs to repay rupee loans up to $10 billion. And of course, some more changes as well regarding the lock-in period, etc. But is this enough? Is there more that could have been done? We are putting those questions to Mr. Hemant Kanoria, CMD of Shrey Infrastructure Finance, who's joining in right now from Mumbai. Mr. Kanoria, thanks very much for taking time out and speaking to NDTV Profit. Yesterday, the measures announced by RBI for infra funding, do you think that it will lead to fresh investment in infra?
No, I don't think so, because you see the guidelines which has been announced yesterday has been primarily like for the infrastructure debt fund. The government has made certain relaxations, but the first point is that how do we get the infrastructure debt fund up and running? Because till now, if you see that there have been discussions, but there is no infrastructure debt fund which has yet started off, either through a mutual fund route or an NBFC route. So I think that what is more important is that for the government to address and see that how these two kind of models which has been conceptualized actually starts off, and then we'll then the relaxations when it comes in, it will be helpful. Today what is required is that there are still certain guidelines which needs to be streamlined, certain processes which has to be put in place, and then only we can get the investors to come in. So I think that is the first thing which needs to be addressed.
So essentially, Mr. Kanoria, you'd have expected bolder structural reforms?
Yeah, sure, because I think that the problem today is what? If we actually look at it, the problem is that the investor confidence, overseas investor confidence in India is getting lost. So we have to get that reinforced, and that if once it revives, then we'll start seeing people coming back. So whatever steps we take should be fully directed towards reviving the investors' confidence overseas, whether through taxation issues which has been raised earlier. There has been issues also, and the way the rupee is depreciating, I don't think so that investors will be very confident to invest at this particular juncture because there's so much of instability. So I think that these two areas should have been addressed first. As soon as we put these two areas in place, we would have seen that the investor confidence comes back and we would see the flow coming in. And then there are other steps which has to be taken, the relaxations and the guidelines, etc., which the RBI has announced yesterday. But I think the government needs to act more and take certain bolder steps in investor confidence revival.
Indeed, and do more is the chorus that we seem to be hearing from India Inc. Mr. Kanoria, a brief word on the lock-in period for infra bonds. I think that's been reduced to 1 year from 3. Will that significantly aid in fundraising?
Not immediately. As I said, that there are a lot of more issues which needs to be addressed on the debt fund. Once we are able to do that, then only these smaller tweaking around would help. But the fundamental question which is there, that today the investors do not want to invest in the infrastructure sector in India because there are so many issues, whether it is telecom, power. So these need to be set right. There are issues on the taxation part which needs to be addressed. The foreign currency, the rupee depreciation needs to be addressed. So I think that these are the fundamental issues which needs to be addressed, even to the extent that we had suggested to the government that if they had opened up that infrastructure companies can get listed overseas, because today as we see that in India, the investor appetite is very little. So if the domestic companies can first get listed overseas, there may be fewer companies who can go in the overseas market and raise money. At least that would allow more capital to flow into infrastructure sector. So I think that these are the issues which needs to be addressed first.
Sure. And issues and headwinds, many of them of course persist, and foremost among them I guess are high interest rates. Do you think that perhaps the internal rates of return, they are unfeasible at the current interest rates?
You see at that current interest rates, besides the interest, no one would like to borrow today, because the infrastructure companies also do not know. If you see that the power companies, they have almost like stalled their implementation of the projects because there are so many other uncertainties which needs to be addressed. So until those fundamental issues are put in place, any tweaking around on the interest rates or with the guidelines for opening up investments to come into the country is not going to be very helpful. That is what I feel. But I think that there are a large number of economists and officials who are also having certain thoughts. But from the industry, I feel that these fundamental issues need to be addressed first.
Sure, of course. Many research houses, they are now also flagging off the concern that perhaps financiers, they can have higher NPAs and slippages driven by the infrastructure sector. Do you see that as a possibility?
No, I think that it is very difficult to make a general statement. There are companies which are having problems. There are institutions, financial institutions and banks who have lent to those companies. Definitely they will face problems, but it all depends upon the portfolio which the specific banks and infrastructure institutions they have. But it's very difficult to make a general statement. Definitely the newer companies which have been setting up power plants or the companies which had taken licenses for telecom, there's a lot of uncertainties for them, and people who have had high exposures in those particular companies would definitely face a problem.
Sure, of course, and it is true that banks and NBFCs who've already got exposure to infra space, there is a reluctance in taking more exposure to the sector, and bank finance is not really easily available to these projects. But just a quick last word, Mr. Kanoria, on the order intake, which has really been at an all-time low. Do you see that picking up in the next half?
No, I don't think so. You see that, as I said, that there are still opportunities in the infrastructure sector. From our perspective, from our company's perspective, we have not seen a slowdown because still we have a lot of opportunities available. We have been very careful in lending on in this particular sector. So our portfolio is still very healthy and good, and we have taken a review of our portfolio. We don't see any kind of stress or problems there. So still I'm quite hopeful and sanguine about this particular sector, because I think that if India has to grow, infrastructure will grow along with it.
Mr. Kanoria, so good to have chatted with you. Thanks very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak to us, give us a little more perspective there. We're wrapping out this edition of Power Lunch, but as we leave, we're leaving a market which is still, absolutely flat right now, 0.2%. Can't be really said that it's some sort of upward momentum and that there's just about an hour to go before the markets close, hour and a half. You have 5128 on the Nifty, which has been extremely volatile right since the start, and really it's also been a rather range bound sort of trade. When you look at the day's high and the day's low on the Nifty, you'll see that it's been trading within a 32-point range, 5,102 and 5,134 on the upside. That's the Nifty range, and the Sensex right now at 6925, just 45 points up. Broader markets doing slightly better. Advanced decline picture still remains as is right from the start. Even Stevens pretty much about 55% of the stocks advancing as we head into the last 1.5 hour of trade. Meanwhile, the rupee still continues to languish below 57 to the dollar. Nothing really to talk about as far as the rupee goes. Whether or not we're going to see some form of RBI intervention coming in, that is something that the traders are hoping, they are expecting, but whether or not it will come in, we're not here to speculate on that front. Well, we're wrapping up this edition of Power Lunch. Thanks very much for watching. Coming up next is breaking news. We'll take you through all the top market action and the corporate action as well. Stay tuned to NDTV Profit.